I've been waiting a very long time to make this video. Not as though there was something holding me back from making it, but I just feel like this has been a long time coming. For those unfamiliar, this is effectively the third episode in a very slow series where I give my thoughts on all the 3D Zelda games in chronological order. This began all the way back in 2018, when a much younger me gave his reasoning as to why he thought Ocarina of Time was a bad game. That video reached thousands of people, many of whom were very angered by what they saw. After a couple years of thought, I decided to replay Ocarina of Time and make a much better video, which now stands as an official record of my thoughts on the game. After I made that video, I noticed how much I had enjoyed the process. I loved making a very thorough analysis of a very popular game and getting to talk about it with so many people. It was then that I decided to embark on my current project to review every 3D Zelda game. However, I've never been the best at keeping up with YouTube, and playing a Zelda game for the first time to review it takes a tremendous amount of time. When I recently took an unprecedented hiatus of multiple years, I began to wonder if I would ever get around to coming back and playing the other Zelda games. But against all odds, here we are. As the title indicates, I've made the Majora's Mask review. Not as though this is somehow a definitive review of the game, not by a long shot. I just titled this the Majora's Mask review because of the significance of this moment to myself and maybe a few of my most loyal viewers. I hope you can forgive the long intro and cheesy title, but the wait ends now. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you the Majora's Mask review. A couple of things to note before I start talking about the actual game. First off, I elected to skip the 3DS version this time and only play the N64 version through Nintendo Switch Online. I did this for a few reasons, but mainly I did it because people don't seem to think the 3DS version of Majora's Mask is superior to the N64 version like they do with Ocarina of Time. The 3DS version is sleeker in terms of controls and presentation, but there were also some gameplay changes that arguably detract from the overall experience. At least that's what people told me. If you guys want to debate this in the comments on your own, be my guest. Secondly, this review will reference my Ocarina of Time video at least a few times. It can still be enjoyed without having seen that video, but Majora's Mask is the sequel to Ocarina of Time, so I'll be reviewing the game as such. That said, let's actually talk about Majora's Mask. Right off the bat, Majora's presentation is the first thing anyone's gonna notice. Majora's Mask was made as a quick turnaround follow-up to Ocarina of Time, making use of the same art style and gameplay engine. Like all N64 games, Majora's Mask is dog ugly, but that doesn't matter, of course. What does matter are the game's controls, and these also aren't very good in my opinion. I talked about how clunky Link's movement and fighting felt in my Ocarina of Time video, and the same applies here. Link feels stiff to me and often moves around in awkward and imprecise ways. I recognize that this could be due to the fact that I didn't use an N64 controller when I played Majora's Mask, but I experienced the same thing when I did play Ocarina of Time on 64. Switching to a GameCube controller made things a bit better for me, and Majora isn't very movement-focused anyway. Even though most of my favorite games rely somewhat heavily on tight controls, I don't take these issues too harshly. Most of my opinion is going to come down to the rest of the game, so let's move on to that. At its core, Majora's Mask follows the same Zelda formula that I talked about in my Ocarina of Time video. In a sense, beating a classic Zelda game is like putting together a puzzle. To get to the end of the game, you need to figure out where to go, what to do, and how to do it. It all stems from a main story goal that you're given pretty much at the beginning of the game. In the case of Majora's Mask, some bad stuff is going down in Clock Town, and you're told to go get 4 somethings and bring them here to fix everything. Obviously, I'll go over the story in much greater detail later, but this setup gives us the standard set of Zelda goals to accomplish. As far as the main questline goes, completing these 4 main tasks is what you'll be doing. Just like in Ocarina of Time, you need to figure out some stuff in the overworld to get to each temple, then beat each temple to get one of the 4 things. In both the dungeons and their pre-entry sections, you're really just trying to puzzle out what you have to do to progress to the next task. The game will be very slow-paced on a first playthrough, as the pre-dungeon sections especially take a lot of pondering and experimentation to figure out. Any number of missions of a wide variety might be required to enter a dungeon, which often made figuring out what to do very tricky. As you may remember from my Ocarina video, these in-between dungeon sections were just about my least favorite parts of the game. In Majora, I didn't dislike them as much, but they still weren't my favorite. This is really just an opinion thing, but I felt like they dragged down the pacing of the game a lot. They were fairly mundane a lot of the time, and I would often get stuck on a certain task for a while before figuring out what to do. However, none of these pre-dungeon portions felt as convoluted to me as some of the ones in Ocarina of Time. You may recall that my biggest problem with Ocarina of Time was how obtuse a lot of these goals were. I certainly got stuck a few times in Majora, but it never frustrated me as much because the tasks always felt logical once I got the answer. The solutions seemed just a bit more organic and logically consistent with the world. I never figured out what to do and thought, that's so stupid. If I was thorough in my exploration and took my time combing through each relevant area, I was able to progress in the game. Except for the requirement to make it to the ocean, that's stupid and impossible to figure out and very obscure. Other than that, I'm pleased to say that this takes Ocarina's biggest problem in my opinion and outright fixes it. The pre-dungeon sections are reasonable to figure out. Good job, Nintendo. I still don't love them because of their pacing, but that's beside the point. Once you complete a pre-dungeon, you obviously gain access to a dungeon, and this is where I think the meat of the main quest is. Maybe I spent more time out of the dungeons, but I've always thought that the dungeons were where content really existed in classic 3D Zelda games. And almost to my surprise, I loved Majora's Mask's dungeons. Some of these might seriously be the best dungeons I've played in any Zelda game. The first one is pretty basic and short, but the other three are really excellent. Some Zelda dungeons are very A to B in nature. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, but it does lead to a certain lack of depth. You just kinda beat all the guys and solve every room and boom, you're done. Majora's last three dungeons, though, are nothing like this at all. They're these vast mazes of chambers and hallways, all connected at several points. You constantly need to learn the layout of each section and figure out new paths you can take once you open stuff up. Somewhat controversially, I really loved the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time because of how complex its layout was. I think Zelda dungeons are at their best when their biggest challenge is figuring out how to traverse them and where the next area you open up even is. That sort of intricate dungeon design is really stimulating to me, and I was happy to see it return stronger than ever in Majora's Mask. What's probably coolest about these three final temples is that the structure itself physically changes as you work your way through each one. Snowhead Temple, Majora's second dungeon, features a huge central chamber with several rooms and tunnels branching off. To get to the boss at the top, you need to move this huge stone pillar up and down and punch these giant blocks to change which rooms you can access. Then the last dungeon, Stone Tower Temple, allows you to flip the entire dungeon upside down and back a few times to solve puzzles and work through the layout. The third dungeon, Great Bay Temple, might be my new favorite dungeon in Zelda history. The whole dungeon is full of gigantic, industrial pools of water and branching underwater tunnels. To beat the dungeon, you need to figure out how to manipulate the flow of water and open various pipes to get to the end. Great Bay Temple was seriously a joy to figure out. All of Majora's dungeons were really enjoyable and definitely a highlight of the game for me. So Majora's main questline structure is very similar to Ocarina's at its core, but there are a few subtler things I'd like to mention. For one thing, Majora's Mask saw the return of Ocarina's Gerudo hideout stealth section, and I really don't know why. This one wasn't the most infuriating thing in the world, but do people like these? Maybe I'm just crazy, but I hate slowly sneaking around the Gerudo fortress and having to start completely over the instant one of them spots me. The Gerudo hideout is pretty much a one-off, but there's another stealth area in the Deku Palace before the first dungeon. Stealth sections like this seem to be in every Zelda game, and I really have no idea why. If any of you like doing these, please enlighten me down in the comments. On the other hand, something fairly new that Majora adds to Ocarina's structure is what I'll call the timed platforming challenge. There are a few sections throughout the game where you need to very quickly follow a challenging, platformer-esque path to an important destination, and I also kinda hated these. Majora's objectives are very puzzly and thoughtful by nature, so adding a bunch of fast-paced, movement-based challenges doesn't really fit the style in my opinion. They were also pretty frustrating and stressful to me, largely because of the control issues. N64 Link is a clunky guy, and having to walk on thin paths and make tight jumps super fast just doesn't feel good at all. They aren't common enough to ruin the game or anything, but the platforming sections are a disappointing addition to Ocarina of Time's formula. Mechanically, the biggest change to Ocarina's dungeon and world progression formula is the inclusion of masks. Alongside classic items like the hookshot or bow, Majora introduces a lineup of various masks that Link can wear. Some of them don't do much and really just act as tools to complete a specific quest. However, for the first three dungeons, you're working in a land inhabited by a different race of people. While you do this, you collect a transformation mask for each race, which allows Link to physically transform into that species while the mask is on. This obviously changes up gameplay tremendously. Link can become a Deku Scrub, a Goron, and a Zora, all of which provide a new set of abilities and limitations. While transformed, Link loses access to most of his items, but he can also float, roll, swim, or do whatever cool stuff that species can do. This leads to a lot of clever puzzle design and world progression, as each new transformation unlocks new ways to interact with the world. I could go on about the cool mask abilities, but my words aren't that valuable. These transformation masks are super cool, and they provide an incredibly fun and refreshing twist to Ocarina of Time's established formula. So there you have it. Majora's Mask carried Ocarina of Time's style into a new experience and improved a lot of the issues I had with it. The dungeons are better, the goals more refined, and the mechanics more interesting and diverse than ever. It's truly a nice improvement that never strays too far from its— oh my gosh, what is that? Alright, the jig is up. Everyone watching this who's played Majora's Mask has been screaming at me this whole time now, so I'll finally address the elephant in the room. Majora's Mask takes place in a time loop. The main problem that you're trying to solve, your motivation to beat all the dungeons, is that the moon is literally falling out of the sky. It's constantly looming over you as you play, moving closer and closer as it threatens to crash into the town and kill everyone. Unlike in Ocarina of Time, you are very much under a time crunch to defeat this threat. You quickly discover that the moon will crash down in just 3 days, which isn't nearly enough time to fix everything. To solve this, whenever you want, you can play the Song of Time. Playing the Song of Time will reset everything in the world back to the beginning of the first day. Essentially, you're stuck in a 3-day time loop, which affects nearly everything about how the game is designed. Most impactfully, just about everything in the world gets reset completely when you return back to day 1. If you completed a dungeon, learned a song, or got a major item, you can keep all that, but any interactions with the characters or changes you caused in the world simply vanish. Also because of the loop, every event and character action happens the same on every cycle, mandating certain quests to be completed on specific days. Right off the bat, this appeals to me personally because I love time travel. Back to the Future is my favorite movie ever, Prisoner of Azkaban is the best Harry Potter, I'm just a sucker for any story where manipulating time is on the table. The general idea of Link repeating 3 days over and over again and using this ability to save the town is awesome. I really love this concept for Zelda, although its integration into the actual gameplay has its flaws. I think it's really cool that you're required to snoop around and explore areas on certain days to figure out what you can do on which day. However, this also leads to a lot of backtracking and repeated content, making the game feel fairly padded at times. There were a few times where I'd get to an area where there was something to do, only to find out that, oh no, you're too late, you had to get here on day 1, or something like that. Yeah, it makes sense that different things happen on different days, but having to redo stuff just to complete a goal on the correct part of the cycle isn't exactly fun. For instance, Goat is the boss of Snowhead Temple, and he's so fun. I think Goat might be my favorite Zelda boss ever, but I had to fight Goat 4 times to complete all the tasks I wanted throughout the game. Again, I know that redoing stuff fits in logically with the time travel concept, but repeated content is still an issue with Majora's Mask that I don't think should be overlooked. Aside from this arguable filler content, there are a few more subtle problems that I had with the 3-day mechanic. Namely, I didn't always understand which things stayed permanent through a cycle reset or why. Whenever you turn back the clock, all your rupees, arrows, bombs, and other disposable items are lost. The game shows them sort of falling out of Link's pockets or whatever during the cutscene as you reset and fall back in time, but why does everything disposable go away? Why don't any of the non-consumable items disappear? Then there's some weird, even more specific stuff, like how your sword upgrades work. You can get your sword improved twice, with the first iteration being a prerequisite to the second. If you reset the clock with only stage 1 of the sword sharpening, however, you're left with your original sword on day 1. How does that work? What, did the sharpness of the edge fall out of Link's pocket too? But then the unbreakable stage 2 sword sticks with you through the reset, which I'm grateful for but still confused by. There are some even larger repercussions of the 3-day cycle in terms of story, but I'll shut up about chronology for now. I could go on about subtle inconsistencies with Majora's Mask's time loop mechanic, but most of them are very inconsequential and nitpicky. Yeah, it doesn't all make sense, but I still think time travel was a great idea for the game design. It really shakes things up and adds a layer of complexity to Majora's structure. It makes the game stand out as one of Zelda's coolest and most unique entries, and for that, I am grateful. So that's all the gameplay for the main story, but something I've also completely avoided so far is the side quest content in Majora's Mask. Fans of the game absolutely adore the optional tasks you get to do, and it's easy to see why. Most side quests allow the player to get to know some of the game's characters, which adds a sense of emotion and reality to the world you're in. Taking the time loop into account, many quests also require that you learn people's different schedules from day to day so that you can interact with them at the right times. There's even a little notebook you can get to help you keep track of all the people in town, which is a very nice touch. Obviously, a lot of these quests also give you tangible rewards, like heart pieces or new masks, which adds a functional motivation to complete side quests as well. Now, I'm about to say something that'll probably invalidate this entire video in the eyes of Majora's Mask fans, but I've just gotta be honest. I did not obtain every mask on my playthrough, nor did I come very close to it at all. I got some of them, and I can tell there's a lot to enjoy in these side quests, but completing every objective isn't really my thing. To be clear, I don't consider my apathy to side quests as a flaw in Majora's Mask by any means. I'm just saying that when I played it, I didn't complete a lot of the side quests. I'd talk to some townsperson who needed help, but then I would just give up after like the 8th person I talked to couldn't help me. I've got a world to save after all, and the next dungeon isn't going to beat itself. Again, this is not a bad thing about Majora's Mask. That's just my experience with side content. Undoubtedly though, Majora's side quests are a majorly compelling draw of the game. They add so much personality and realism, and I can really admire the sheer quantity of things to do and find in the world. And now, here we are. Majora's Mask refined Ocarina of Time's dungeons and structure, and even built on that formula in new creative ways. There's an ingenious time travel mechanic and a whole host of side quests to do that adds so much to the game. It's nothing to go crazy over, but The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is— oh my gosh, wait, there's even more to it than that! Okay, I promised that was the last of that stupid joke, but I am making a point here. By itself, Majora's Mask's game design is pretty solid. Some sequences aren't great, but the overall concept and execution is pretty good, much better than Ocarina of Time in my opinion. I think this style of game is sort of outdated and misaligned to my personal preferences, but Majora's Mask is a well put together game. However, there's much more to it than that. Throughout this entire video, I've been deliberately avoiding a very huge part of the game. Its fans have probably been screaming at me over it too, and now I'll finally address it. Majora's Mask's story is masterful. And okay, before I played Majora's Mask, I'd heard plenty about how great its story was, but I don't think anything could have prepared me for the experience I had. It didn't, reshape my life or anything, but Majora's Mask's story absolutely changed the way I look at narratives in games. There's just so much to talk about regarding Majora's story, and so much I probably don't even know, so I'll just do my best to explain what the big deal is. And there will be spoilers, so if you're thinking about playing the game for the first time now for some reason, you might want to stop here. The first thing most people notice about Majora's story is the much darker atmosphere compared to other Zelda games. There have always been scary moments and intense themes, but Majora's Mask feels very foreboding from the opening moments of the game. The visual design and music are much more downcast than usual, as are the characters and scenarios. A lot of the characters have super creepy designs, and their dialogue and actions are often violent and ominous. The game just feels a lot more mature than most Nintendo games. There isn't profanity or anything like that, but Majora's atmosphere doesn't feel like that of a children's game at all. There are themes of death, mourning, broken relationships, all things that induce strong emotions in the player. Again, there's nothing non-family friendly, but a couple of characters just straight up die in this game. Majora's themes are fascinating and really make the game stand out. Another thing that sets Majora's story apart from other Zelda games is that a lot of core Zelda themes aren't present at all. There's no Master Sword, no Triforce, you don't fight Ganon, and Zelda's not even in it. Majora's Mask is a Legend of Zelda game where Zelda is not a character. The game doesn't even take place in Hyrule, it's set in a completely original land called Termina. This makes Majora feel very unique among the Zelda games, and it affects some other stuff that we'll talk about later. Beyond those differences, the first thing that grabbed me personally about the story was this great sense of mystery and curiosity about the world I was in. We don't really know where Termina is relative to Hyrule, but we know Link gets there by accident at the beginning of the game. Skull Kid beats Link up and takes his ocarina and horse, so Link starts to chase him. You end up chasing Skull Kid to the edge of a giant pit, and Link falls in. There's a super weird little cutscene, and then Link is just sort of under Termina now. Some people theorize that Link actually dies here, and Termina is some sort of afterlife, but I won't get into that today. I'm a believer. Regardless, Skull Kid then turns Link into a little Deku scrub, leaving him swordless and powerless aside from whatever things a little tree guy can do. You eventually make it out of the cave you were trapped in, and then you meet the Happy Mask Salesman. He's so creepy and weird, but he says that he can fix you if you get back your ocarina and a very special mask that was taken from him by Skull Kid. He adds at the end, though, that you need to do it quickly because he has to leave Termina very urgently in 3 days. Super ominous, but keep in mind that Link has no idea about the falling moon yet. I wish I could have played Majora's Mask without knowing about the moon at all. That would have added a lot of mystery and intrigue. Either way, after you complete a few tasks and get the ocarina back, you start to learn more about what's going on. You find out that the moon is falling and that Skull Kid is being possessed by a spirit in the evil mask you're supposed to get for the salesman, the titular Majora's Mask. Apparently, he's been wreaking havoc all around Termina, and as I mentioned earlier in the review, the only way to save the world is to go find 4 somethings and bring them back to Clocktown. What I'm getting at by saying all this is that the introduction to Majora's Mask absolutely hooked me with its story. There was so much mystery, so many unanswered questions that I just had to play through the game to see what happened. I said that Majora's structure, though refined, wasn't really my favorite style of game, but this story gave me so much motivation. These mysterious setups and others were so compelling that for the first time ever, the story of this game was one of my main drives to play it. That's what I mean when I say Majora changed my perception of game stories. For the first time in my life, the story of a game I was playing took the spotlight. Even still, the story of Majora's Mask extends far beyond the main tragedy you're trying to prevent. Each of the 4 areas you need to complete are home to a different race of people, and they themselves all have a compelling story. In addition to saving Termina from the moon, you're also saving the people from their own crises. These add even stronger motivation to complete Majora's core goals because you're helping a smaller group of people in the short term as you progress. The problems you have to fix also get increasingly darker in theme as you play, which contributes greatly to the emotional content of Majora's Mask. The first people you help are the Deku Scrubs, whose princess has gone missing. The king blames a monkey for her absence, and the monkey is going to get burned at the stake if you don't save the princess. Next, you have to save the Gorons, who are all going to freeze to death if you can't fix the problem in Snowhead Temple. After that, you need to help the Zoras because the ocean water is contaminated and too warm, so a bunch of Zora eggs will never hatch if you can't fix the problem. I don't even really know what was going on in the last area, but it was something about a bunch of spirits who were trapped in evil bodies and needed to let go of the past or something. I probably got that one wrong, but Majora's main 4 objectives are really emotional and dark. These goals add so much motivation for the player, and also a lot of interesting characters to meet and help out. And yet, the writers managed to add a lot of really solid humor to these objectives so that nothing is too depressing. There were multiple times in my playthrough where I straight up laughed out loud because of the characters. Helping out the 4 races in Majora's Mask created a highlight for me in the game's already incredible story. I very much admire the tale this game has to tell, but I definitely don't think it was executed perfectly. For one thing, the ending didn't quite live up to what I was hoping for. Again, obviously major spoilers coming up, but the 4 things you need to bring to Clocktown are actually these 4 giants. Once you win over their assistants, you call them to help you on the last day, and they come over there and catch the moon. This might be the coolest thing I've ever seen. After they catch it, you still need to deal with Skull Kid and his evil mask, which leads you to the final boss fight and the resolution of the game's central conflict. This is all fine, but I personally hoped I would get a bit more insight into the game's events here. Was the evil mask causing the moon to fall somehow? Why does the moon have a face? Is it alive? When you beat the spirit inside Majora's Mask, why does the moon fly away? Most of the game's conflicts are explained, but almost all of that happens much earlier in the game. I had all these questions about the moon and the mask as I played, but there wasn't much of an answer to some of them at the end. I'll admit that this is a minor problem for 2 reasons. Firstly, you all know I miss a lot of details and I didn't do every side quest, so it's possible that all my questions are completely answered and I'm just an idiot. Maybe Nintendo even explained some of this in a book later or whatever, so you can enlighten me in the comments if that's true. Secondly, however, this really is just a matter of taste. I expect so much from the endings of books and movies all the time, and more often than not, I'm underwhelmed with their conclusions. Majora's Mask is full of mystery, so most people probably enjoyed walking away from the game with a bunch of questions. The endings I love almost always have some surprise payoff, and I guess I was just hoping there'd be one here. It's not a bad ending by any means, but it was disappointingly average compared to the rest of the story in my opinion. There was one more issue I had with the story, and it's all derived from the time travel mechanic. As I said, your goal is to win the assistance of these 4 giants by beating the 4 dungeons and saving the people in each area. Since a time reset also reverts each area back to its pre-saved state, that would mean, canonically, that I didn't fix anything, right? I kept my items and stuff, but the characters never have any recollection of previous timelines. How are the giants any different? And even if the giants are immune to the reset and they remember me helping them and they're cool with the fact that my work is erased, what about everyone else? Forget the moon and the giants, what about the fact that all the people I've saved and fixed are broken again? Yeah, I saved them at one point, but in the timeline that matters, where I stopped the moon from falling and time actually continues, did I really help anyone? It sort of detracts from all my achievements in the game. Again, I tend to miss a lot of details, so if there's a reason none of this matters, please let me know. Nevertheless, these issues did have some impact on my enjoyment of the story. Despite all that bad stuff, I still adore this game's narrative. The themes, mystery, and emotional content of Majora's Mask elevate it so high in my opinion above every other Zelda game, but I think there's one key piece that seals the deal for me. There's one core aspect of the story that sums up all the other great stuff and ties it together. Maybe it's not a huge deal for other people, but I think Majora's story compelled me so much because of one simple fact. It's not about Link. I mean, of course you play as Link, but think about it for a second. In every other Zelda game I've played, Link is the chosen one. He's the one destined to defeat evil and save the world. That's still very cool, but I think the concept lost a lot of weight for me when Nintendo used it so many times. Being an awesome hero of legend or whatever is great, but it doesn't lead to the most compelling story. Anytime a story has the chosen one, you pretty much know what's going to happen from the beginning. Majora's Mask has a great story to me because it isn't like that. You're not the chosen hero. The game doesn't say, you are the prophesied boy who is uniquely capable of saving the world. It just lets you know that the world is about to end. There's an evil guy and the moon is falling. Here's how you can stop him, but it's up to you. Link is very important and powerful in Majora, but the story is about everyone else. As you play, you aren't fulfilling a prophecy, you're helping interesting groups of people with their compelling problems. And even though I knew Majora's premise, I didn't really know how the game was going to end until I beat it. With Ocarina of Time, I knew I was going to kick Ganondorf's butt, but I didn't know what would happen at the end of Majora's Mask. Was I going to kill Skull Kid? Was the happy mask salesman going to try to kill me? How on earth do you stop the moon from falling? That's the beauty of the mystery. You'll just have to wait and see, because Majora's Mask is not about Link. Let's do it for real this time. Majora's Mask is Ocarina of Time 2. It uses the same style, its gameplay structure is very similar, and it's technically a direct continuation of the story. I had a lot of huge problems with Ocarina of Time's design, to the point where I just think the game is okay, average at best. Majora's Mask was made under an immense time crunch thanks to some really interesting development history, yet it still had to take on the challenge of following up the widely beloved Ocarina of Time. If you ask me, it delivered. A lot of the archaic elements are still present, but so much of what I hated about Ocarina of Time was smoothed out and refined here. Majora's Mask had an improved gameplay structure with much better dungeons in my opinion, and a world that felt so much more lived in and real. It introduced a new item system and a super interesting time travel mechanic, making gameplay even more interesting. Couple that with an incredibly rich, mature story, and you've got one heck of a sequel. Yes, there are problems, but I think Majora's Mask is a very good game. I honestly wasn't expecting too much going in, but I was pleasantly surprised by what I found. This older style of adventure game isn't quite my thing, but I still enjoyed what I got here. It's a game that's best taken pretty slow. It's good to stop, think, puzzle out, and feel things while you play. Majora's Mask is frustrating at times, but I definitely think it's a game worth experiencing. You know, I can't help but think that this is the game that should have been called Ocarina of Time, because now you actually use the ocarina to travel through and manipulate time. Anyway, thanks for watching.